My name is Julianna Jules Sterling, and today I'm 29 years old. But when I was 11 years old, my parents had already decided that I wasn't the right daughter they wanted to keep. They never said it in clear words. They wrapped it up in fancy terms like special schooling, better focus, and professional care. But I understood the truth the moment my old suitcase was placed on the front desk of a cheap residential care home, and my twin sister, Vivian, was still sitting safely in the back seat of our expensive car. Vivian was the prodigy. She was gifted. She was the daughter my parents, Arthur and Catherine Sterling, proudly introduced at every party, every school event, and every elite gathering. I was the one who trembled with fear as soon as I stepped on stage, who sketched old buildings instead of solving complex math problems, and who was like an ordinary stain in their extraordinary family. That day, my father looked at me like I was a failed stock ruining their bank balance. My mother wouldn't even meet my eyes. I kept waiting. Maybe they would stop the car, come back, hug me, and say it was all a terrible joke. But they never returned. Years passed. I was no longer that abandoned child, but a woman they couldn't even recognize anymore. Then one morning, they saw me on national news, where the whole world was applauding my community architecture project. Suddenly they wanted to reconnect with me. Suddenly, they loved me. I invited them to dinner and said I wanted them to meet my real family. But when they came to my home and saw who had raised me, the colour drained from their faces. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me, how is the weather in your city? Is it calm? Or is it the kind of day where secrets hidden for years are about to pour down like rain? I was born into a home where love felt like a scorecard. My parents ran Sterling Elite Academy in Palo Alto, a place where wealthy people brought their children to be ranked and polished for the Ivy League. To my father, every child was a project. To my mother, every child was a business deal. To other parents, they were experts. To me, they were just judges. Vivian was everything they wanted. She was reading at age 4, playing violin at age 6. I loved Vivian, and she loved me too. But standing next to her was like standing next to a bright light where people only pointed out how dark you were. I wasn't crazy. My brain just worked differently. When people shouted at me, numbers would swirl in my mind. My hands would tremble during timed tests. When Vivian wrote perfect answers, I drew sketches and building designs in the corners of my notebook. My father called it wasting time. My mother called it lack of ambition. At the dinner table, they didn't ask me how my day was. They asked what Vivian's score was and why mine was lower. Once, my father jabbed his finger at my report card and said, "Being average is a sin when you carry the Sterling name." I was 10 years old when I realized that love wasn't automatic in my house. It had to be earned, and Vivian was running faster than me. The saddest part was that Vivian never took advantage of her position. When our parents weren't looking, she would sneak me snacks and tell me I was good at things they didn't understand. But she was just a child too. She couldn't protect me from the adults who had already decided my value was 0. The year everything fell apart, we were both preparing for the entrance exam of an expensive boarding school. The Sterling Academy brochures had our photos, 2 twin sisters, symbols of excellence. But behind closed doors, I had cried myself sick. The entrance exam came. Vivian topped it. I failed. the admission director told my parents that perhaps I needed a less stressful environment. My parents didn't hear support, they only heard failure. For 2 days, a funeral-like silence hung over the house. Then, one night, my mother said, "Jules, pack your bag. We've found a place that can handle your needs." I thought it was tutoring. I thought maybe, for the first time, they were helping me. The next morning, they drove me to a residential home in Oregon called Pinecrest Center. When my father signed the papers there, I understood that this wasn't a school, it was a disposal center. My father told the staff I was unstable and difficult. My mother said they had tried everything, but I just wouldn't rise. I stood there, holding my old backpack, crying, trying to explain that I wasn't bad, I was just scared. They didn't look back even once. Vivian's face was pressed against the car window. She was crying. But my father just drove away. The first week, I slept in my shoes, thinking maybe they would come at night and say this was all a lesson. I wrote letters every day. I apologized. I promised I would stop drawing and top the class in math. No reply came. When my first letter came back marked refused, I understood. I wasn't their child anymore. I was a flaw in their perfect sterling image that they had thrown in the trash. The initial months at Pinecrest Center were the darkest days of my life. Every child there had arrived with some kind of wound, but my wound was the deepest, because my parents were alive, they were wealthy, and yet they had discarded me for being unproductive. I stopped using my last name, Sterling. Whenever anyone asked me about my family, I would fall silent. But then one day, Ms. Sarah Brooks entered my life. She came to Pinecrest as an art and architecture volunteer. She was a silver-haired woman who talked about the history of old buildings and how they were constructed. Ms. Brooks never asked me why I was there. She simply looked at my notebook, filled with sketches and house designs. She placed her hand on my head and said, "Julianna, your eyes can see what others cannot. You understand the soul of buildings." For the first time, someone didn't call my drawings wasting paper. She brought me old architecture books. Her husband, Thomas, a retired structural engineer, also started coming every week. Thomas taught me how to lay the foundation of a strong building. He told me, "Jules, sometimes the strongest things are those that have already been broken." Gradually, the Brooks couple became what my biological parents never could, a support system. They took me out of foster care and invited me into their home. When they started the legal process to adopt me, my real parents were sent a notification. My father replied with just a one-line email. "We agree to this outcome. We have no objections." That very day, I changed my name to Julianna Brooks. I erased the Sterling name from my mind like a bad dream. My new life began in a small house in Sacramento with the Brooks family. There was no competition there, no scorecard. When I was weak in math, Thomas would sit with me for hours, teaching me geometry through building designs. He turned my weakness into my strength. I studied architecture. I wasn't the top student, but my designs carried a humanity that no one else's did. I designed shelters and community centers that made poor children and homeless people feel at home. The secret to my success was that I built for those whom the world had cast aside as average. Years later, my urban healing project received national recognition. I had transformed one of San Francisco's largest slums into a beautiful community. My interview was airing on national television. I was smiling under the studio lights, thanking my foster parents, Sarah and Thomas. That evening, 18 years later, I received a message on my phone. It was from my biological father, Arthur Sterling. Julianna, we saw you on TV. We always knew that Sterling blood ran in your veins and that you would achieve success. We told your sister Vivian as well. We want you to come to dinner at our house this Saturday. We have many things to discuss with you. I read that message and laughed. They didn't love me, they loved my success. Their academy was in trouble. They were facing several lawsuits over high-pressure education, and they needed my success to save their image. I replied, "Certainly, I'll come on Saturday, and I'll also introduce you to the family who taught me how to become all of this." Saturday night, when I arrived in front of their expensive bungalow in Palo Alto, Sarah and Thomas were with me. Vivian was already standing at the door, tears in her eyes. She hugged me and began to tremble. "I'm so sorry, Jules," she whispered. Inside, my biological parents were waiting eagerly at the dining table. Their faces wore their usual perfect business smile. But as soon as they saw Sarah and Thomas behind me, their smiles vanished. Arthur Sterling stood up. "Julianna, who are these people? I said this is a private family dinner." I pulled out a chair and seated Sarah and Thomas in front of him. "You're absolutely right, Dad. That's why I brought my family with me. Meet them. These are the people who turned into a diamond the garbage you threw on the front desk of Pinecrest 18 years ago."
Silence fell over the dining table. Arthur and Catherine Sterling's faces had turned pale. To them, Sarah and Thomas were just two ordinary people. But to me, they were gods. "Julianna, this is rude," Catherine said, steadying her voice. "We invited you here to forget the past and make a fresh start. Sterling Academy needs a success story, like you. We can show the world that our foundation made you this strong." I stifled a laugh. "Foundation? You tried to break me. My real foundation consists of those old architecture books Sarah gave me, and the courage Thomas gave me when I thought of myself as a zero." Arthur slammed his hand on the table in anger. "We arranged expensive boarding schools and elite care for you. What do you think, that Pinecrest was cheap?" "Pinecrest wasn't cheap, but it was death." Vivian suddenly spoke up. Her voice was trembling, but it carried a new strength. "Dad, stop this act. I saw how many letters Jules wrote that you burned without reading. I saw how you turned every success of mine into Jules's defeat. I am a gold medalist, but I am not happy because I always felt that every trophy of mine was built from Jules's tears." Vivian held my hand. "Jules, I don't want to be a part of their perfect family lie anymore." Catherine started crying, but they weren't a mother's tears. They were the tears of a director whose film was flopping. "Julianna, please. The academy will shut down. People are accusing us of pressuring children. If you just take one photo with us and say that your success is because of us, everything will be fine." I handed her a file. Inside are my adoption papers, a copy of my changed surname, and photos of those old letters with refused stamps. If you use my name or my success to save your academy, this file will go to the press the very next moment. Arthur Sterling slumped back into his chair. He now understood that the child he had called a failed investment could today bring down his entire empire. "Thank you for dinner," I said, standing up with Sarah and Thomas. "But I am not a Sterling. I am Julianna Brooks. I designed my own home, and there is no room in it for you." We walked out. Vivian came with us. She left her expensive house and that pressured life behind forever. 1 year later, Sterling Elite Academy shut down. Arthur and Catherine's names were dragged through scandals of toxic parenting and academic abuse, so badly that they left Palo Alto and disappeared somewhere. Vivian and I together opened a center called the Twin Foundations. This was not an academy. It was a place where children were not ranked, where even an average child was considered a diamond. Sarah and Thomas are still with me today. Every Sunday we have dinner together, and on that table there is no scorecard, only laughter, stories, and that peace which comes only from those who love you, even when the whole world calls you worthless. I did not forgive them, but I forgot them. Because the real revenge was not to destroy them. The real revenge was to live the life they said I would never be able to live.